Last year we produced a report looking specifically at the governance and culture within the banking sector. And the reason we produced that report was we were asked to what extent have banks particularly become healthier. And we set out to answer that question by measuring or rating governance and culture, primarily within the largest banks which had caused the most damage and had been fined the most. What we found was that most of those banks were still rating very low in terms of the extent to which their governance and culture was not creating value, but also the risk that was being carried, essentially the human systems risk that existed within their organisations. So in terms of lessons from a governance and culture perspective, that's a very serious one that hasn't been learned by most of the banks. And in fact, today there's a lot of denial and a lack of acceptance that it remains a serious issue that needs addressing.
Well, I think there's a number of key lessons have not been learned still. From our perspective in Strategia, we focus on culture, the fact that the culture in banks in particular was a major contributory factor, and we're certainly not convinced that that has been addressed.
All the experts seem to be quite consistently saying that the likelihood of another crash is extremely high. There are very few people out there who know the subject matter well who would disagree with that. What's interesting, of course, is the wide range of opinions about what's likely to cause the next crash. Lots of people, by the way, are thinking about cyber security, cyber warfare, cyber risks could become a new trigger to the next global financial crisis, and who knows what else it could be. It could be trade wars, it could be poor governance in the banking sector, it could be one of a number of things.
Yeah, it's a very good point. I think it's a contributing factor. I believe that the continuous cyber attacks that takes place every single day will erode the confidence in both technology and a cloud-first strategy. That is actually the fundamental solution for many of the collaborative challenges that are required to solve some of the FS challenges we have. Yeah.
The banks did not understand their risks, and one of the reasons they didn't understand their risks was because of their cultures. There was a lack of honesty. People did not feel free to pass bad news upwards. Lack of integrity. People didn't necessarily do the right thing when nobody was looking. Lack of teamwork and trust amongst teams.
I think it's really clear that CEOs have recognised now over the last few years that the reputational risk of their business is just such a crucial component, and that has only increased over the last 10 years since the financial crisis. And the evidence is there to see that if there is some sort of reputational incident, the value lost by the business could be 10 times greater than any sort of financial sanction imposed actually onto the firm itself. So CEOs and their advisors are now really taking the reputational risk to the business incredibly seriously, and that will only continue.
Institutional investors have huge amounts of power, so whether they're pension funds or whether they're insurance companies, they make the decisions that sort of drive the economy forwards, and they have real power. We think there's a lot that they can do to act more responsibly and to ensure that risk is taken into account. So there's a range of things they could do, such as aligning their portfolios with a 2 degrees world, as the Paris Agreement says. They can use their power to lobby companies to have fair working standards, to pay the living wage, for example, and all of those social issues and all those environmental issues are ones that make the economy, in our opinion, far more safe from future shocks.
Well, the general public has got enormous distrust in financial services, and banks absolutely at the heart of that. There's been a lot that's been done to try to turn this around, and there's some great initiatives out there, but it's going to take a long time. Every issue that arises just erodes that trust that little bit further. The recent issue this week with Danske Bank, that was an avoidable issue that has further eroded trust.
If you look at the wider financial system, one of the problems that we have is that any system needs a common goal. And the problem with the system as it stands today is that you have a disparate group of actors or organisations really chasing their own self-interest. And our view is that that needs to shift, and that the financial system should be predicated on every organisation fundamentally serving society. And if you are able to do that and align everybody to that goal, actually you're able to contribute to society and benefit society in the right way, but also you create significant financial value.
Well, I think better transparency allows a better challenge. I think someone said, the disinfectant of sunlight. So if consumers, regulators, stakeholders understand what's going on, what the fees, what the charges are, and I know asset managers are still very opaque about their fees. You have to ask them twice to get the answer. That's just a small example. But if you have better transparency, that will encourage better governance, that will encourage better culture, and has to be part of the solution.
People think that transparency plays a big part in helping the marketplace to behave properly. Of course, we live in a capitalist society, which is great. There are lots of reasons why we are able to benefit significantly from that type of marketplace. But with that structure comes responsibility. And if there is information that the consumer or the market can't see because of obfuscation or because of opacity, then it's actually preventing the free market working the way it's meant to.